Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having us here. Very excited. I'm Ambika Nigam. I head up our mobile product and connected devices platforms here at Bloomberg Media, and really excited for this awesome cross-section of folks that we have here today to talk about speech and voice. Really interesting mix from publishers, academic, entrepreneurship, so we're going to dive right in. And I think it would just be great to start by going down the row here, have everyone introduce themselves, and give us a one-line around what you're excited about and what brings you here today to talk about speech and voice. Amir, should we start with you?
Sure, would love to. Hi. My name is Amir Hirsh. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Audioburst. Audioburst has built an AI-based search engine that listens to the rich media world, spoken word specifically, radio, podcast, video, and knows how to extract pieces of content to deliver to the users, personalized and interactive, either a single burst or a string of it, understanding that audio now is king, and we need to build the engine to provide it to the users in a way that they want to listen to.
Hi, my name is Taniya Mishra, and I am Director of AI Research and Lead Speech Scientist at Affectiva. Affectiva is a Boston-based spin-off from MIT, and we build solutions to enable interactive systems to be able to understand people's emotions from their face and from their voice so that we can have a truly interactive, natural conversation with our in-home or in-car agents.
Ken Romano, Director of Product at the Associated Press. So the AP has been supporting the media industry for 172 years with fact-based journalism. And we look at this as an opportunity for us to support the ecosystem in a new format, not just newspapers, broadcasters, but now looking in voice. So how can we take our content, develop it in a way that it works well on voice, and then support the entire industry?
Good morning, I'm Marc Lavallee. I run research and development at the New York Times. And one of the simplest ways I think to describe our R&D's role is that we look for the gaps between what the Times is currently doing and what we could or should be doing, and then really work to advocate for that kind of progress. And so voice for us is one of the biggest topics for 2018, really taking the progress we've made in the audio space with podcasts over the past couple of years and really figuring out how to expand that into these more interactive formats.
My name is Steve McLendon. I am a product manager at Google, working on news and the assistant, and thinking about how we bring news experiences to the assistant in the context of the assistant driving new forms of search for users, particularly around voice.
Awesome, great. So, one way I thought we could get started here is just to give level set everyone around where we are today with speech and voice, especially from a consumer standpoint. I think we'll dive into technology and we'll dive into the product piece, but what are we as human beings kind of used to? What feels normal? And perhaps we start down here with Tanya or Amir in terms of where are we today, since you guys have a kind of interesting research perspective.
Sure. So I think, in my perspective, 2018 is definitely the year of voice interfaces. And I think the successful or splashy launch of Google Duplex has certainly solidified that. And that's a change from a few years ago when chatbots were the king. So even a couple years ago, when a survey of the leading conversational voice interactive agents, when that was done, it was, people thought that it was okay, but none of them, there were opinions like none of them are in a place where we would consider good. And there were, questions about how fragile the system was, how many points of failure there could be in the long chain of technologies that sort of enabled this voice interaction. And, about 2 years down the road, look at us today. We are super excited about voice interfaces. It's generating a lot of good conversations. Like, we are excited about it, but we are also finally thinking about questions around privacy, being transparent, ethical use of data, because the technology is getting really good, where we are starting to ask the question, can I trust my ears, right? Yep.
Thank you.
Amir?
I think what was interesting that happened in the past couple of years, from Audioburst perspective, what we saw is that voice interfaces have matured to a place, and Alexa and Google Home has done a very good work in educating people that they can speak to the devices. And I don't think it's going to stop over there. We're going to start speaking more and more to our mobile phone, to our smart TVs, to our cars, to our devices. And it created, I would say, two major challenges or shifts that we as a media industry need to look into. One, it opened up to be a screen-free, hands-free experience. So all of a sudden, we need to build all of the interfaces and all of the way that people consume content in a way that they do not touch, they do not watch, they need to understand the context and the delivery all from just listening to it. And the second, and maybe that connects to what Taniya said, it became much more personal, much more emotional. We're conversing to a robot, to a device, and that brought the level of expectations higher over there. And I think as an industry now, it actually created a great opportunity for us no longer to only broadcast and lecture and tell the users what they need to listen to, but actually converse, provide them with the experiences that they're looking for, cut takes of audio from here and there and content. And I think users now expect more and more of an on-demand, a tailored, a personalized experience around it. It's all tied around that, one single word of voice.
Right.
To say, I can speak to you, speak back to me. Don't just lecture me.
Yep, yep, that makes sense. And good segue. I love how we kind of have split the couch here, actually. Like publishers, we're all going to be friends after this. So maybe we'll go down here because kind of responding to that, I'm curious because all three of you have products that are in the homes of all of us here. And how are you building products that take that context, that take that conversational nature into account today? If you can give any specific examples, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. So I can start. When we look at building products, I think a lot of people in this room don't have the luxury of just saying, hey, we're going to build a new product, let's hire 10 more people and build a new format. So we don't always have the luxury of saying, I'm going to build this brand new format. We look at what are we doing existing today, and how can we, one, scale it, and how can we, two, curate it so we're getting the right content on the right device. So we've supported the radio industry for decades, and we said, wait a minute, these broadcast-style text snippets that we were writing for radio DJs are actually written in the same style that works perfect on text-to-speech. We were only doing a subset of them. And we realized that sometimes it's the unsexy things that you got to work on. It was actually the workflow that made the biggest difference. We changed our workflow in our CMS so that all of a sudden we could start scaling them. And now we've got over 1,000 a day of these text snippets that can go out to everybody with metadata that can be parsed to any of our publishers that need them. So that tends to be the way that we look at it, is how can we repurpose and reuse, figure out what works, and then double down and invest if we need to.
Yeah, and in some ways I think that's been a challenge for us when we started taking published New York Times material and running it through text-to-speech last year and sort of seeing what that led to in terms of an experience. We're like, oh, this isn't good. And it wasn't necessarily the text-to-speech voices, because they have been rapidly improving to the point where they have almost achieved parity with human speech. It's really two things. One, that flat delivery doesn't carry any of the emotion that I think we've really, as NPR, New York Times. I used to work at NPR. New York Times, coming kind of from a cold start several years ago, has figured out how to do with audio content, with podcasts. But the other bit is that, not surprisingly, a 1,400-word article written for reading doesn't translate well to audio. And so I think some of what we've been doing is trying to figure out how we, through a combination of editing routines in humans and then also looking for algorithms like summarization algorithms and things like that, try to make our material more listenable. And that could be some combination of human-read listenable items and text-to-speech.
Yep. That's great.
Yeah, and we definitely think about a lot of the same issues. We also think about how do we make publishers successful in this ecosystem. So in the context of what does discovery look like, how do we accurately map user intents to third-party publishers who are creating great content. A lot of our work also is with publishers to how do we make it easy for publishers to create once and have distribution on these voice-based platforms. How do we connect them from kind of all the work that they've been doing kind of in our legacy search platform and think about that in the context of voice. and the right media types. Right now, audio is first, but you can imagine scenarios where there's other media types that we would connect folks to, video, images associated with it. And I think those are the things that are exciting as we go forward as well.
Yep, that's great. That's super helpful. And actually, on that vein, this is actually a personal question for me, so I'm taking notes on this one. Curious how you all are thinking through or addressing this idea of, at the OS level, we're seeing, so for like a Google Home or an Alexa, where you don't really have to elicit a skill, right, or an app or a bot. How do you think about supporting brands at the OS level versus at the app or skill or bot level, in the essence of supporting discovery for all of these publishers and brands?
So I think there's a few pieces to that. One is how do we make it easier for publishers to create kind of branded and owned experiences? These platforms are all very nascent, and I would say our work to kind of develop the SDKs and the right toolkits and really the right workflows for publishers is also just really nascent at this point. And so, we will continue to make that easier for publishers. And then I think there's a secondary question that is around ambiguous intents, and how do we think about what is the user actually asking for when they say something like, give me the New York Times, which is unclear in a stated context. Does that mean we should give them the print article, the website? Does that mean we should give them the daily? Yeah. And those are the kinds of things that I think we're working our way through, both on the user side, like how do we understand that? How do we solicit the right kind of follow-up questions? Like how do we engage our users in a conversation so that we have a better understanding? How do we understand their routines? Like it might just be that, hey, this user asked for the New York Times and they listen to the daily every day, and we should understand that better. Or they might have a subscription to the New York Times, and we would want to connect them to the exclusive content that they could get through their subscription. Those are all the kinds of problems that I think we're working through, and we think of it as how do we partner with publishers to kind of create the right kinds of experiences for them.
Got it. Great.
I think we're trying to build off of a very similar starting point in trying to really take an outside-in approach to understand what behaviors are emerging and habits are forming with these devices today, since a lot of it is the functionality that they come with out of the box, right? That, I think the number is something around half of people with smart speakers in their house, which is about 1 in 5 US households, have not added a third-party skill, right? So that's where they're starting. And so, I think instead of saying, we're a publisher and we have this material, how do we make it available on these platforms? It's starting by trying to figure out what is it that people want in these different contexts throughout their day, in the morning, or if they have something in the kitchen, what are they trying to do in the kitchen? And we complement other teams within the New York Times. Like, so we have a cooking app and a desk. And so they're thinking about how to make cooking, like recipes and things like that, available on these platforms. But we're also doing in-field research to figure out what is it that people want when they're in the kitchen, because that's not necessarily the same thing, right? And ultimately, we'll have both, but in understanding where the ecosystem is today, what are those right starting points, right? Because they might just want something to listen to while they're cooking, as opposed to being like, wait, what was step 4? Yeah. So that's I think how we're trying to come at it from both ends.
Got it.
Yeah, and I think for us, we look at it as the truly multimodal experience. We have no idea whether someone is going to be interested in audio or video or photo or text. Yep. So upstream, we try to make sure that we kind of curate all of that media together, and it's all queryable, so that when the platforms come out with any new features or new APIs or different publisher requests come in, if they want the video for that particular story, we can provide that. And then if they say, hey, wait, show me a photo gallery, or if they want to, or if there comes a time where you could say, hey, send this to my iPhone in podcast format, we have that there. So we're looking at things very upstream, making it as flexible as possible for whatever implementation Google and others come out with.
Got it. That's great. And we were actually just talking about this kind of backstage. We're getting used to speech and voice over the last few years, and then all of a sudden now we're hit with video, right? So how do you guys think, how are users responding to this, and especially from a UX perspective, how do these two interplay together well?
I mean, I think, as soon as you bring video, and we are all, I would say, getting very comfortable with being able to talk to our devices. But every time, let's say you're having a video conference and, you want to turn on the video, you just pause for that 1 second to make sure, am I appropriate? Is my environment appropriate? How do I feel about letting the other person see me? We seem to not ask that question as much when we pick up the phone or we talk with or through our devices, right? But that said, there's a lot of value to being able to see people along with being able to hear them, right? So at Affectiva, we spend all of our time thinking about emotions and how do people display emotions. How much of your emotional content is in your voice, how much of it is on your face, and how much of it is in the words you say and the gestures you use and where's your gaze, right? So I think video is really interesting because it can give you that additional bit of information. And we're all talking about voice interfaces, we're talking about conversational agents, but think about having a conversation with a person, when you're able to see them or when you're with them in the same room versus talking to them on the phone. A lot of times when you're on the phone, it takes us just a little bit longer to anticipate not just what their intent is, but what is their emotion. And to have a truly natural, interactive conversation, emotions are just as important as intent because they are co-constraints. We're constantly balancing, what do they want and how do they feel? So I think that as we as an industry move forward, if we can provide value with video to the consumers, I can definitely, I see that, maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road, people will be just as comfortable turning on the video. I have seen younger generations, teenagers who just constantly have their friends on video in their rooms. It's just this, they're ubiquitous and they're ambient, right? They talk to each other when they want to, and the rest of the times they sort of just do their own thing. So I think it's being able to provide value by making our world more connected and being able to accomplish tasks faster.
Taking the risk with drawing some fire on me, I'm going to say something that more personal. Let's go personal.
Yeah.
I think video and video clips, often in short format pieces of content, are things that technology has brought into the media world in order to get the attention of the users, in order to draw their attention, in order to lock them up. In my opinion, the media industry knows how to engage and to produce high-quality content that will entertain, educate, let us, connect with us way better than most of, I'd say, me, okay? The technologists know how to do. I think the gimmicks, the short clips, the Snapchats, the flashing, changing images with text up on them, lower the conversation a little bit. And I'd rather the content to be higher quality and engaging the people on the message, or even if it's just funny or entertaining by the mere fact of the facts that are in it, to be built by the content itself, by the content industry, by the media broadcasting industry. And I think us as a technology need to take a little bit of the backseat over here and find how do we connect that, how do we draw the essence, how do we engage the users from the good quality. I would not want everyone to start creating short clips, videos in order to keep the users from running away to the TV. I think if we get high quality products and high quality content, I think this voice revolution can actually bring back high quality, really engaging content like we always did, and stop chasing after, let's satisfy within a second. I think goes back to the native versus applications that you've mentioned before. I think good brands that create good content will have users on their own apps and will have users that will engage only with them as a brand because individuals are connecting to brands and trusting brands. So they'll go over there. I think the native and OS responsibility in that split is to cover the discoverability, is to expose the users to the different variety of brands, to the different suggestions with proper brand recognition. So we start with the OS on tastes and samples from different sources, and whatever we like, we connect with, and then we open the app and we connect it over there. Have it be, and I agree with my colleagues over here, video, audio, text, whatever is best to describe the piece of content.
Yeah.
If it's a footage from the street, it needs to be video. If it's two people interviewing, I'm not sure that the video, looking at them, that's what we need to win with.
No, I've been excited about that, and I've seen that with a lot of the publishers I've been talking to, where just over the past year, so many publishers are realizing, wait a minute, why are we going to compete to be the breaking news update first thing in the morning? Why do we need 1,000 people doing that? And more publishers are thinking about what unique content can I provide, like the Daily and others that is on brand for my particular audience and might be a little bit differentiated than just that first thing in the morning update where you're competing.
Great. Awesome. Great stuff. I'm going to open it up for some Q&A if there's anybody that has questions. Otherwise, I got a few more. It looks like we have one over here.
Maybe for Steve. So I've noticed in search in the last year or so, like whether you do it on your phone or your desktop, there's something called like featured snippets, which basically whatever the query is, it'll take a snapshot and show that at the top, like in a box. And there's talk that like, by 2020, like 50% of all search may be voice related, and that there's a correlation between like Bing and Google possibly showing these feature snippets, because like if I was to ask a question, to a device, you're not going to get the 10 blue links anymore. So is that something that's happening? Because I've even seen some Google put out some of this, saying there is a correlation.
So we spend a lot of time thinking about how do you serve great query results in the context of voice-based platforms, in as much as they are fundamentally different than, say, web or mobile, right? So each platform, I think, brings its kind of unique opportunities and challenges. As we went from kind of like computer-based websites to mobile presentations, and the ability to show choice kind of changes. In the voice space, I would say we're in early days figuring out what are the right user interactions to kind of satisfy, understand people's queries and the intents. The queries themselves fundamentally are different. The way you talk is different than the way you type. And so we're doing a lot of work trying to understand intents, and then a lot of work to understand how do we kind of have the same kind of publisher ecosystem and rich result set that we've had for users on the web or on mobile in voice as well. And those are just things that I would say we're really working our way through right now, because it's so early.
Hi, my name is Renee. I'm a grad student from NYU Journalism. So this question is me for Steve and Mark. So I wonder, Steve, Mark, and Ken. So I wonder, how do you design your news product on voice interface differently for different platforms? Because what I see right now, most media publications, when they adapt to the new platform like Alexa or Google, they just mainly put their podcast or radio and to there. So just like they didn't use the feature of interactive on those platforms. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, we have a couple of ways that we're working through that right now. So one is really trying to understand what are the jobs to be done where people are starting to habitually use these voice devices and platforms in their daily routines, and that could be different in the morning than it is in the evening, or it can be different if you are looking to get caught up on something. That would be more of an explainer format versus just give me the headlines sort of thing. So we're doing that. For us, that's starting off with in-field research, right? To just understand what that actually is. And then, most of how people are doing that right now is in this essentially voice-only interaction model with things like Alexa and Google Home. But I think we're looking ahead, even to later in this year, with more people having Google Homes with screens, or more people buying Echo Shows that are either still voice first, where the audio is still the sort of the main interaction bit, but we can be supported by visuals, versus essentially voice assisted, which is probably more people just asking for a command, to play a video or something like that, because I think there's not just one way of sort of serving the reader through those through voice, right? Depending on what those interaction models are. And I don't think that we as publishers get to decide how people are going to use these devices, right? If you put something with a 7-inch screen in the kitchen, that might be a voice-first experience. It might be a voice-assisted experience because they just wanted to show a TV show, right? I don't think we necessarily know that yet. And so we need to be poised to be able to respond to how consumers sort of decide what habits and formats they build around these.
Similar for us, I mean, our product is our content, essentially. And Claire, I think, had made a comparison to a jigsaw puzzle earlier this morning. And I think of it as, imagine the jigsaw puzzle pieces that can be put together to make a whole bunch of different puzzles. And that's the way we think about it. So we look at it at the very elemental level of a piece of content that has a headline, a longer headline, a summary, a body, a photo, a video all together. And then how do you mix and match all of those different things for each particular use case? We try not to make products that are one and done, things that can be reused. A headline that you might hear read to you via Alexa or Google Home can't be a clickbaity headline. So we know not to use those, not to use the clickbaity headlines on Alexa or Google. And in the same way, when you're walking down the street in New York City, you're probably going to see AP headlines on the Link NYC kiosks. We use those same headlines there. So we find ways of reusing based on the use case. And then we save the more interesting headlines for the web.
That's great. I think we have one question here. This might be our last one. Go ahead.
My name is Miriam. I do data science and finance. And I'm glad you're talking about the sort of voice home devices, the Alexas and Google Homes. This is sort of a personal question. Does that mean that every one of you own one of those? If you don't, why? And when you do, aside from the advantages, which we all know, are there things that almost freak you out about it? I know when I talk to my friends, at least in the data science world, it's sort of who owns that data? Is it constantly listening? Is that problematic? Could you talk a bit about that?
Yes, I do own a voice interface at home. Personally, I use it a lot as a timer in the kitchen. My husband likes to use it to find out what the weather is before he walks the dog. And my children, have found that they can just ask these conversational agents how to spell things, or questions related to geography or math, and they get slightly faster responses, perhaps, than from their parents. Probably bringing some fire onto me once I get home. But in terms of what freaks me out a little bit is how comfortable my children, who are 6 and 8 and 2, are with these interactive agents. I mean, and that makes me constantly think about the ideas around responsible use of consumer content, privacy, being transparent, and because our children are growing up in an era where it is, for them, this is the way the world is. They just talk to different devices in their homes, which means it puts the responsibility on those of us that are building technology and building content and basically providing these services to think hard about what are the ethical questions around building these devices. And we also need some people who ask us, should you be building it?
Right. Yeah, great point.
I've got, sorry.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, I have a home at home.
real quick, yeah.
And the same thing, actually, I look at how my kids interact with it and how natural it is relative to screens, computers, other kind of human-computer interactions. And as a result, the kind of information that they're willing to disclose, or even like the unconscious disclosure of information, I think, is the thing that I think a lot about. For the record, the Google Home is not always listening.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good thing to land on, actually, to make everyone feel good about where we are today. Cool. Well, I mean, it sounds like we could go on and on about this, but I just want to thank all of these great panelists for being here. Really good discussion, and thank you all for being here too. This was wonderful.